My name is John Cookson. When I first started looking into a project, I knew it had to be something I loved. I had become very interested in history and knew that there was a lot of it in our area, so I decided to start there. I found my beneficiary through another Eagle Scout in the troop, Bobby Garcia, who had worked with the Bergen County Historical Society at Newbridge Landing for his project. I was referred to Mr. Smith, their committee chairman, and my contact throughout the project. We threw some ideas around and eventually decided that the Historical Marker Project would be the best for both me and the Historical Society. This project would entail restoring just a few of the many signs in Bergen County that had faded or fallen into disrepair, as well as creating a GPS trail to raise awareness for the signs. Once I had picked out the right project and generally planned how I was going to carry it out, I needed to acquire the materials. I found out that Ace Hardware in River Edge was supportive of Eagle projects and that they might give me some discounts. When I went in, I spoke with a guy named Greg, who turned out to be an Eagle Scout himself. He said to make a list of all the materials I needed, and if they had them in the store, he would give them to me as a donation. This helped me greatly, as I didn't need to raise any money for my project. Though I did buy a few things that were not from Ace, I was happy to pay for them out of pocket. With my plan in place and my materials bought, it was time to get to work. In order to take the signs down, I had to get separate permission from all of the sign owners, and just to be safe, the police departments for the towns they were located in. One of the hardest challenges for me to overcome was contacting the Bergen County Sheriff's Department. After looking for one of their rangers at 2 of their parks, I ended up calling their office. This, however, was not an easy task, as many of their lines weren't connected to anything. In the end, I had to call their emergency number, but I got through to them and got their permission to take the sign down. With a complicated plan like mine, sometimes you encounter people that can be hard to deal with. But I soon found out that large metal signs are harder to work with than most people. The Cooper House sign in Oradell put up quite a fight. No matter how hard we tried, it just didn't want to come down. In the end, we had to use an assortment of power tools to forcefully remove it from its post. Although I hit some speed bumps along the way, so many things went well with my project. Once all the signs were down, the restoration went off without a hitch. The signs were well cleaned and carefully repainted. We learned a few techniques and skills along the way, such as how spilling silver paint all over the blue paint doesn't make for a good final product, or how you need to clean all the silver off your brush before reusing it for blue. The GPS trail came with its own problems. In order to get an accurate reading of the coordinates, at least 3 readings had to be done at 3 different times. To do this, I decided to send groups out with GPSs to walk the trail, separated in 20-minute intervals. Unfortunately, one of the groups decided to walk fast, and caught up to the group in front of them. In order to keep the proper distance, I had the fast group go ahead, and made the slower group wait behind. In the end, the scouts seemed to enjoy the hike, and I got some accurate readings to use to make the official trail. After the project was done, I had one final meeting with Mr. Smith, my primary beneficiary, to discuss how he felt the project went. He said he had seen some of the signs and was very happy with how they had come out. Although working with so many people presents many challenges, I do have to thank everyone who helped out on my project, from the littlest new scout to the adult leaders who turned out. We all worked together to restore markers that are very important to our area. I am very proud of these signs because I often walk or drive by them and I notice that they really stand out. If I'm noticing the signs, others must be as well, and that means that they are learning about the rich history of our area. And in my eyes, that is the most important outcome of my project. I'm John Cookson, Eagle Scout, and this was my Leadership Service Project.
I'm Kyle Guinta. The rank of Eagle Scout is something I've known I wanted to achieve since I first joined Boy Scouts. Of course, this meant that I would have to complete a leadership project. Since 6th grade, I've wanted to be an author, so I knew that my project had to have something to do with reading or writing. After a little thought, I came up with the idea of building a movable bookshelf and reading environment for those who don't have access to the same reading experiences that I had. My search for a beneficiary started with looking up local organizations that I thought could use my help. After some searching, I knew Family Promise might be a good choice. So, my mom and I went to visit with Miss Heller and Miss Duggan. There was a bit of a twist in my plans, though, when I learned they already had something similar to my reading environment built for the families. However, they did mention that my help may be needed at St. Peter's Church for when the families visit there. After being introduced to Miss Gallagher and a quick conversation with her, I had found my beneficiary. My fundraiser at Habit Burger was next. After talking to the manager and setting up a date, I spread the word by having the principal at our school email the flyer out to the entire school. Then I spoke to my parish after every Mass on one Sunday. The fundraiser went better than I could have imagined, and I ended up raising more than double the amount I had planned on. I now needed to collect the supplies. This comprised of two parts, collecting the books and buying the materials that I'd use for construction. This included finding a colorful rug and beanbag chairs to help with the environment of the reading corner. Collecting the books was the easier of the two. I emailed the principals of the schools in town and asked if I could set up collection boxes in the schools. All of them said yes, and with help from a few volunteers, the boxes were set up. I collected enough books to fill up my bookshelf, and then had to buy at least 4 extra boxes for all of the overflow. The buying and construction part started out great. Many of my supplies were donated by Ace and Cookson, and the things that I did need to buy were easy to find. After purchasing my wood, Cookson was nice enough to cut the wood for me. This is where I began to experience some problems. I discovered the dimensions of the backs of my shelves were completely wrong, but that was partially my fault due to some inaccurate measurements. The rest of the problems, however, were due to the incorrect calibrations on the saw, thus making the other corners not square. Thankfully, Mr. Cookson let me come over to his house the night before my project to help re-square all of the pieces. With that over with, the building part of my project began and went as well as I expected. Those who signed up showed up on time and all worked to the best of their abilities. Each of the working days went as I had planned, and we were able to complete all of the work on schedule. With the bookshelves built and painted, the last step was to sort the books and put them in the shelves. After many tiring days, the construction of my project was now finally complete. My final task was to go to St. Peter's and be the first person to try out the new reading environment. So, the next date that the families from Family Promise visited St. Peter's, I made sure to be there. I sat down in the comfortable environment with the bookcase we built and read aloud to one of the families that came. The whole experience for me was eye-opening. Because of my love of reading, I knew from the start my project would have an impact on others. But sitting with the family and seeing firsthand the change it made on the very first night we used it was amazing. I'm Eagle Scout Kyle Guinta, and this was my service project.
My name is Matt Haggerty. I first got the idea for my Eagle project about 2 years before it began. I had worked on the tree farm on Cherry Mews here in River Edge for my Star Scout service project, but we only finished cleaning about 3 rows of plants. But the tree farm was still completely overgrown with weeds and it could not be used at all. I couldn't just leave it as it was. My goal was to get rid of all the weeds and make the tree farm usable again. That also included repairing the irrigation tubes running throughout the farm. The last thing I wanted to do was build a shed which would be used for storing tools and extra materials for upkeep of the farm in the future. I found my beneficiary by attending the town council meetings, and, after my project was approved, Alan Negreen was appointed as my beneficiary representative because the actual beneficiary is the entire town of River Edge. Most projects require a fundraiser to get the materials and tools needed for the project, but I had a bit of a time crunch because my 18th birthday was approaching. And when you're a scout, you age out of the program at 18. I sent emails and letters out to friends and families asking for any size donation they'd be willing to give. People were more than happy to help out, and we raised close to the exact amount needed. The rest was covered by my generous parents. I got the materials for the shed from Cookson Brothers. We constructed the walls and doors of the shed in my backyard, and then we brought them to the farm for assembly after the weeding and cleaning were complete. This was more easily said than done. The farm was densely overgrown, with some areas resembling more of a jungle than a farm. We employed almost every tool imaginable to clear the weeds, some as thick as small trees. But with teamwork, persistence, and a lot of sweat, we made steady progress. During the project, I faced many challenges, but a major challenge was working with such a large group of people. I had to make sure the younger scouts were being safe and getting work done while teaching them about weeding and plant care. The biggest obstacle, especially in the beginning, was getting enough people to come out and lend a hand. One morning, about 3 people showed up to help, and I was worried. So I sent an email to the troop right from the worksite asking for more help. Thankfully, for the afternoon shift, we had one of our biggest turnouts. One thing that went particularly well with my project was all the people who offered assistance. The thing about help is you need to ask for it. Everyone I asked for help had no problem pushing me closer to earning the Eagle rank. And getting steadily closer to that goal was a great way to keep me focused. In the end, I think everyone was pleased with the outcome. The town is happy the tree farm is no longer a wasted space. It is now a nice area that can be used to better our town in the future. I know that Mayor Mignon and Alan Negreen were both pleasantly surprised with how nicely the farm turned out. I learned a lot from this project. I learned about taking charge and setting yourself on the path to achieve your goal. I also learned that making a lasting change in your town is possible, even as a busy 17-year-old. Some changes might be harder than refurbishing a tree farm, but with enough time and effort, serious changes can be made that have lasting impressions. I'm Eagle Scout Matt Haggerty, and this was my leadership service project.
I'm Jack Lobely. Ever since my freshman year, I had been part of the St. Peter's youth group. So, when it came time to pick an Eagle Scout project, I decided that I should give back to the youth group. I talked to my friend and the rector of the group, Nick Belfiore. I asked him if there was anything in the group's meeting room that needed improvement. He said that he would really love to have a wall-mounted bench. From looking at the room, you could tell that he was right. All the seating in the room was just old donated couches, some of which were probably older than me. A wall-mounted bench would provide much more seating and open up floor space for other activities. Soon after I had the idea, I called my Uncle Tom, who's a cabinet maker by trade. He ended up going above and beyond, coming up with some great ideas for the first blueprint. From there, we came up with the idea of making it into a storage bench, because the room would benefit from having a place to store all the excess stuff. With the design of the bench changing, the blueprint had to be revised to add opening lids to the skeletal structure of 2x4s covered in 2 sides by plywood. I thought that the best way to raise money for the project was to go directly to the church. I spoke at several masses and asked for donations, and it was a raging success. I raised even more money than I expected, which meant I was able to give the original design of the benches a major upgrade. However, an upgrade meant yet another reworking of the design. So once again, I drew up plans, calling and meeting with my uncle over and over again, finally settling on a series of simple, though more costly, plywood boxes. I made a deal with Benke's Lumber, who offered to give me $100 off any purchase of lumber. And they'd even cut it for me, too. It was a little stressful supervising the wood cutting, being sure to check measurements after every cut. Now at this point, it probably seems simple. I have the money, I have the materials, the plans are drawn out. I can start, right? Not exactly. Throughout the entire project, there was one problem I constantly experienced: scheduling. As a senior in high school, busy with activities, I had to postpone the project about 1 month from the date I had planned. Then, the week I had actually planned to install the bench, the church held the Family Promise event and people were living in the room that I wanted to put the bench in. So, after postponing it yet another week, I was finally able to get to the project. When it came to the construction day, I was so happy with the turnout. Friends, family, and a few of my fellow scouts all came together, and the construction happened even faster than I had planned. Boxes were made, lids were tested, and hinges attached, and the sections were primed, test fitted together, and then disassembled. To make space in the meeting room, several couches had to be removed. After contacting the town about the best way to dispose of them, we were ready to transport the bench. Not easy either. We had to carefully drive the boxes to the church, mapping out the route with the least hills to make sure the boxes didn't fall out. With expert help from my Uncle Bob and our friend Peter Morello, the installation day began smoothly, until we ran into a metal support girder right where we needed to bolt a section into the wall. After speaking to Mike from church maintenance, we were able to make adjustments to get the section secure.
The bench was painted over the next few days with a lot of help from the troop, including some younger scouts and some youth group members. Base molding was cut and installed, and then only one thing was missing: the cushions. The design of the bench was so unique that the cushions had to be custom made. After weeks of waiting, they finally arrived. They fit perfectly, and it made quite a difference in the room. I visited Nick to donate the surplus funds back to the youth group, and he told me how much the group loved the bench. It's a great feeling knowing that my project helped a group that means so much to me and to our parish. Giving back can sometimes be hard work, but it's always worth it. I'm Eagle Scout Jack Lobely, and this was my service project.